This is a video one of you guys sent over to me, and you're like, Luke, you should check this out because it's about your favorite thing in the world. Starfield, of course. But look at the comments. This is a video from IGN. This guy's back must be killing him from single-handedly trying to hold up IGN. I miss games journalists like this guy. Can we go back to this, please? Used to watch Jim on Video Gamer UK. Had no clue IGN had hired him. Absolute legend.
Caleb's 92 donated
all these things. Like I said, all of the comments on this video are like, actually, it has been a long time, I actually think, since IGN made a very good video. Love the guy. Keep him. I'm intrigued. And guess who this is? I believe I know who this is, but he is now making videos specifically, it seems, for IGN. Previously, we've seen his videos for Eurogamer. I think that's where he previously was working. They're owned by the same parent company, I believe, but now he's making stuff specifically for IGN, which is a good move. But I think the fact that you're seeing the comments so positive, I mean, it intrigues me. It intrigues me, you know, color me fascinated. Let's see what he has to say about Starfield. The title of the video is Starfield Can't Be Fixed Even with a 2.0 update, which this isn't. Which I have a feeling I'm going to be snapping in agreement with some of this. Let's see what it is. Let's see why you guys sent me this.
Whatever you do, don't call it Starfield 2.0. At a recent preview event for the big updates and content drops coming to Starfield, Bethesda seemed eager to downplay any comparison to the kinds of extensive overhauls enjoyed by the likes of Cyberpunk 2077, No Man's Sky, or indeed Fallout 76. Personally, I think they're selling it a bit short.
Well, I do think it is fascinating to hear it framed that way, because I think with Todd, sorry, I almost forgot. With Todd, you have to remember that I don't think Todd thinks Starfield has any major problems. I don't think Todd believes that there's anything to really fix in Starfield. So when you ask Todd, is this like a Cyberpunk 2.0? Or is this a No Man's Sky level overhaul? Is this like one of those games that goes from pretty bad to really good? That, I don't think he likes that question. I don't think he likes that framing, because it implies that Starfield is so bad it needs a massive overhaul. It needs salvation. And I don't think Todd likes that. Drink the candle. When I do, you'll never see it. Allegedly. I don't think Todd likes that framing, because again, it implies that there's something wrong. So Todd refusing to call it 2.0, I think is not an accident. I think it's both a matter of maybe a little bit of ego, but also I think this update is going to be smaller than people are expecting, but we'll see.
While the Free Lanes update isn't a big ground-up remake of Starfield that magically transforms it into a different game, none of the other things we might be tempted to compare it to are that either. No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077 are still, away from all the hype, largely the same minute-to-minute experiences that they were at launch. Whatever they clamp onto it, Starfield is and will remain Starfield, a space life sim and questing RPG that offers a sci-fi twist on the basic core gameplay that Bethesda have been peddling since Morrowind. The same framework, the same idiosyncrasies, and more or less the same engine, and that would be the Starfield problem you cannot fix by throwing more stuff into it.
But I would also argue that it's significantly less than those older games, because, I mean, you can go through a list. There's been comprehensive ones done by some very talented creators out there who have gone through and outlined all of the things that used to be in Bethesda games that are now not, that have been steadily and systematically removed and stripped out. So I would argue it's even less than what they've been peddling for decades. It's even more shallow as a result. But I think that it is a fair point to just bring up that Starfield is Starfield, and adding like a cruise mode is not going to magically fix that, you know. And the thing, again, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, again as we go through this, but Starfield, I thought, and it was leaked a few times, that the Free Lanes update, whatever this update was going to be, was going to do things like cruise mode so you could fly between planets within a solar system, and it was going to address the load screen issue going from atmosphere down to the planet's surface. We expected that to basically be like, you go from the atmosphere, you fly down to the planet's surface, and it does like almost like a video that plays over top, flashing clouds and bright lights, and the jets zoom, and it lights up the screen, and then you load in and land. And so it would still have a load screen. It would just be covered up. Apparently, that's not here. Oops. Apparently it's not here. I had seen people talking about it. I had heard it leaked a number of times. Apparently it's just not there. I don't know if they couldn't get it working and so they cut it. I don't know if it was ever going to be there and people were just saying it was a thing. I don't know. Yeah, this launches tomorrow. April 7th is when this update launches. I think I kind of expect to do a main channel video. I tried Starfield one last time, because after this, I think this is the last big thing they're going to do. And I think it's fascinating because it's apparently not that big. But I think it's fascinating that the one thing that actually I thought could have like a really clear impact on the player experience was that overhaul to the load screens. Apparently that's just not here.
Overhaul or not, what's coming on April 7th is a suite of crowd pleasers, a bunch of free DLC, a not free but very cheap expansion, the much rumoured PS5 version, and an extension to the ever-popular best-in-class shipbuilder. The Free Lanes update is the key thing. It vastly expands the space sim part of Starfield's burgeoning package to include cruise mode, which essentially adds a new layer of game sandwiched between the on-planet stuff and the in-orbit stuff that's already there. Cruise mode allows for manual travel between planets, something which was always technically possible, but pointless, arduous, and infamously broken. Now, it's a cool, fast way of getting around star systems that comes with its own unique challenges and radiant events. Free Lanes also adds a new major spaceport in the form of Anchor Point, sure to be a wretched hive of scum and low-tier freelance opportunities like the average Games Journal Discord. Fans of Fallout's Vault Boy bobbleheads, and that's all of us, right, will enjoy the new Colony Wars action figures and associated playsets. A set of interactive toys that give stat boosts. This adorable edition feels like a concession to the idea that Starfield always felt a bit more po-faced than the other Bethesda games. It's certainly the least intentionally goofy, and not in a good way. Bringing back this beloved Fallout feature in this enhanced in-universe toy form brings a sense of sorely missed daftness, but also meaningfully connects Starfield to its much more beloved stablemates. A reminder of why Skyrim in space was such a compelling pitch in the first place. For better or worse, Starfield is every bit a Bethesda game, and we used to love those, warts and all.
Well, I think that people like Bethesda games, but I think one of the problems with Starfield was that they were faced with the challenge of making something truly like original, a brand new IP. Fallout, of course, they bought from, I think it was Interplay or whatever, or Black Isle, whoever owned the rights to it. But they bought Fallout. Elder Scrolls existed back like probably well before the vast majority of current employees started there. It was like mid 90s, I think, when Arena dropped, like 94 maybe when Arena dropped. So, you know, Elder Scrolls is also ancient. So this is like the first time in any practical amount of time that they've actually started from scratch with something. And I think that they were trying to both make it feel like Skyrim in space, but also at the same time give it some unique spin. And what ended up happening was that it just felt weird. It just didn't really have a lot of unique flair to it. It ended up having very little that truly felt unique, which is crazy considering it's a space exploration sci-fi game. You make one unique race of alien that you can meet, and boom, memorable, unique. You got it right there. But they couldn't even do that. Like, there were just a lot of aspects of it where it just felt like bland. You know, it's the saltine cracker of space games.
All right. So while Free Lanes isn't a ground-up redesign, it's a pretty generous update for an almost 3-year-old single-player game that is considered something of a critical flop, a game that feels destined to fade in memory as Bethesda turns its limited attention back to its flagship series. Although,
yeah, well, I'm so interested in how this is going to go. Is it, how much is it?
Warts and all, right?
It's,
So while Free Lanes isn't a ground-up redesign, it's a pretty...
So Trackers Alliance is a package of like DLC quests that you pay for. So this is paid. It's like a paid mod package of quests and stuff. In my experience, they're like 20 to 35 minutes each, depending. And that includes like travel time from location to location with load screens and everything. Maybe some of the new ones are longer. I'm not sure, but that's what you're getting for this. This, I believe it was a Trackers Alliance quest also, where I bought it for like $7 and did the quest, and it rewarded you with a sniper rifle, and it was bugged and you couldn't reload it. So you got 4 shots and then it was bugged on your save file. And they had to fix it through a patch that happened like months later. We made another video like a month and a half later or 2 months later, and it was still broken, which is crazy. But yeah, I believe it's one of those. So this is like paid quests that they do, but official. So from Bethesda. Free lanes is free. This is the cruise mode update that they're adding with that system to go through. So this will just happen to your game automatically. And then Terran Armada, this is apparently, it's like $10 and it adds these new robot humanoids. My personal expectation based on what I've read and seen about this is that it basically is a new class of enemies with its own set of like 3 or 4 dynamic encounters when you're flying or when you're doing this or that, where they'll show up, they might spawn on a planet's surface, and it's just a new group to kill. As far as I can tell, there's probably like 1 or 2 scenes setting up them, but I don't think it's like an actual expansion. So I maybe it ends up being way more than I think it is, but I think it's going to be way less than most people think it is. I think it's basically just a new dynamic set of enemies that will spawn after you get through the initial like initial scene setting them up as a new adversary. But I'm expecting this will be fairly small, which is why it's only $10.
Generous update for an almost 3-year-old single-player game that is considered something of a critical flop, a game that feels destined to fade in memory as Bethesda turns its limited attention back to its flagship series. Although it
Yes, I do. Hearing it described as a critical flop is interesting because it reviewed okay among game journalists. It reviewed okay, but I think that what is very clear is that for the standard, like more typical, you know, meet 'em on the street type of gamer, the reputation of Starfield is not what they wanted it to be. You can go back and see interviews from 2022 and 2023 before the game launched of Todd and Emil describing it as like, one day we hope to be known as well for Starfield as we are for Elder Scrolls and Fallout. And maybe that did happen, but I don't think it happened in the way they wanted it to. You know, when people bring up Starfield in gaming discourse today, it's almost always in the context of something that was a swing and a miss, something that's, you know, a mile wide, an inch thin, something that shows how if you fall behind in tech in gaming, your whole game can be screwed over by it, how important technological innovation and updates are, how important it is to keep up with the competition, technologically speaking. I think the framing of Starfield has, without a doubt, been negative for the vast amount of discourse, and you know, the constant pivots and attempts to reframe it as like, no, that's just Twitter. I think that's maybe naive. I think that's it. The meme of Starfield has certainly pierced, I think, the mainstream veil for a lot of people. It's fun or not, Thing for the 5. Honestly, my biggest problem with the game is it feels inherently lazy, like them being so unoriginal with the Starborn mechanic. That one did genuinely baffle me. Like the fact that it was, and it's the same location. If you haven't played Starfield, basically there's like these what do they call them? There's these sites on different planets where you can acquire these Starborn abilities, and it's like they call it Starborn, but it's basically Dragonborn abilities, just like in Skyrim, and it's just straight up magical abilities where you can just Fusro Da people or go zero gravity, you know, with a blast or whatever. Temples, yeah, I think temple. I was like, it's like archaeology, temple something. Yeah, I think you're right. But and it's the same location, it's the same temple, copy and pasted every single time. And the mini game when you're inside where you float to the star like in the room is the exact same every time. And so it's just really, really lazy. It's just lame, man. It's just lame. It's the definition of copy paste. I mean, literally, it's copy paste in the sense that the locations are the same, mini games the same every single time. It doesn't get more challenging the more those abilities you get, like at all. It marks them for you, if I recall correctly. So you just are fast traveling around to pick them up and collect them. And it's basically the same abilities as Skyrim had. And so it's like, what is the unique element here? You know, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? So not even a dungeon. Yeah. What would have been cool, and what I think most studios would have done, is like, say you get an ability that makes it so you can Fus Roda stuff. You get that ability, and then you have to escape the temple as it collapses using that ability to get through various puzzles or parkour or whatever. Right? It's like, oh, now you're locked in a dungeon. You have to find a way to use that ability in a clever, unique way. But one of my biggest frustrations with Starfield was that they have all of these mechanics, but because of how they built the game and how their systems are set up and their processes are set up, it's all done in isolation. So they have a developer who's coming up with a quest to place dynamically on a planet. but they don't know if you're going to have these Starborn abilities when you reach that point. So the Starborn abilities are never utilized in gameplay other than in the Shattered Space expansion. There's a moment where you use it to like lift trash up with the zero gravity physics and stuff. You can do stuff like that. But in the base game, because they didn't know what you'd have and when, it's just never really utilized, you know? It just doesn't work as well. And so I think it's just too bad. But that's why, like, I've talked to people who are like, oh, I didn't even mess with the Starborn abilities. I remember getting a couple. I didn't even use them. Like, there were people that played all of Starfield and never touched those things. They got them as part of the story, well, like when you need to go to the sites, but they weren't using them actively in gameplay or anything. I think the only innovation is New Game Plus, that it fits with the narrative. Yeah, I do think that the New Game Plus system was a clever way of doing it. It was genuinely a clever way. And as I've said from the moment the game launched, the ship customization is fantastic. I love ship customization in all sorts of games, but they do it very, very well in Starfield. And I'll die on that hill. I think they did a great job with it. Whoever did that needs a raise. But you know, it just sucks when you're talking about like a massive AAA game. A massive AAA game, and you can only point to like one or two things that they did really well. It's too bad.
It must be pointed out that Starfield was not, as is commonly believed, a commercial failure. But chucking more stuff into Starfield emphatically fails to address the game's commercial. It must be pointed out that Starfield was not, as is commonly believed, a commercial failure. But
yeah, this is one thing I often have to remind people. As far as I can tell, of course, we don't have sales numbers or anything. But as far as we can tell, the metrics that Microsoft cares about most with Game Pass is hours played. Starfield was, at launch, a behemoth when it came to hours played. It makes sense. Microsoft for Game Pass, they want you to play on Game Pass for as long as you can to keep you from going over to the other platforms and spending money and time. So hours played is their primary metric. And the data they've revealed publicly was wild. I think it was a couple of weeks after Starfield launch, Todd said that their average playtime was like 40 hours, which is insane. I don't think, maybe not a couple of weeks. It was like 6 months later, because that wouldn't even make sense if it was 40 hours after a week or two. But really, really impressive stats. The people that played it a ton, and that pulled the average time up a lot. So for Microsoft's metrics, I think it was successful. And as for like success on Steam, it did well. I mean, they peaked at like 300 something thousand concurrents on Steam alone. And that was in the early access period. That was when people were only playing if they paid $100 for it. Right. So I think they made a lot of money on Starfield. I think it was successful. Did it do damage to the brand and everything and to the studio's reputation? I think so. But monetarily, I think it was successful. Absolutely. So yeah, anybody who's like Starfield flopped, not by any definition of flopped that I'm aware of.
Chucking more stuff into Starfield emphatically fails to address the game's most critical underlying issue. Not a lack of stuff, but how it is organized across vast tracts of nothing.
Yeah, and presented.
Long-serving Bethesda producer Tim Lamb started the recent press event with an awkward, half-joking acknowledgement of the fact that Starfield is seen as, in his words, irresponsibly big. A game with Skyrim's amount of stuff spread thinly across hundreds of planets, whereas most Bethesda adventures are stuffed precariously into a tiny continent like a suitcase full of octopuses. Starfield ekes its handcrafted quests out like a disorganized dad, scratching molecule-thin layers of the last of the margarine over some toast with a toothpick. That's a tortured metaphor. One might argue, as I have on this very channel, that Starfield could have done with being a lot smaller, but you can't make it smaller in updates. It's already there in all of its empty vastness.
True. I mean, Starfield is a phenomenal example of how framing and presentation of content is often just as important as the content itself. If you have a flood of interesting content, but you make it really difficult to engage with, players are going to feel disenfranchised. They're not going to feel that compelled to go through it. They're going to be frustrated. Even to a certain extent, we've seen this with Crimson Desert. Now, Crimson Desert has a crap ton of content, tons of unique bosses and encounters. And I mean, nobody's ever said, well, actually IGN literally said that. They said they wish there was more to find in the world while exploring, which is that's a crazy take. But I think most normal human beings have never said Crimson Desert struggles with amount of content, but a lot of people have been frustrated with how it's presented in the first 3 chapters, where the first 3 chapters are really slow, they're kind of dry, and they really take a while to get going. But once you get past the first 3 chapters, it opens up and everybody's like, oh, I get it now. It clicks. But that's why it's really important how you frame and present the stuff you've built to your customers and players. Otherwise they might just disconnect and be like, I'm not feeling it. It's important. And I think it's something that Starfield just not just swung and missed. Like they swung, missed, and then hit the Empire in the head. Like they just totally bungled that.
And so the only way forward is to put more stuff in while neatly addressing the other big criticism of Starfield, that it's a space sim which doesn't bother to actually simulate space. Free lanes certainly goes some way to addressing that, and I can't wait to start a fresh game on PS5 Pro, but expectations must rightly be tempered, because this is a game operating right on the outer limits of what is possible with Bethesda's tech. And I don't...
Yeah. And I think it's also, I think, to their credit, I think they looked at Starfield and realized, they being the studio, and they just realized, for us to make Starfield into the game that are the people that don't like it, to turn it into a game they would like, would be such an overhaul. It's basically a sequel. So let's just not. And instead, let's find what the people who already like it want and give them more of what they want, because they're going to keep playing and spending money on creations and stuff like that, which I can understand that decision. I'm frustrated by it, as somebody that didn't really connect with the game, that thinks there's a lot of potential that's untapped and all this. I'm frustrated by that, but I understand the decision. And if I were in charge of the studio, I could see myself landing in the same spot where it's like, people are already pissed with us for taking so much time to make Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5. Do we really want to spend 2 or 3 years basically overhauling everything about Starfield to get it so Luke makes a nice video? Like, do we really want to do that? We already made bank, and I think that that's where they're at. It just didn't really make sense.
XTT Thicolas donated $19.99 through Super Chat.
Thank you, my friend.
Praise be to Todd. He has risen and now will deliver our wallets from us the day after Easter. Remember, guys, this just works. Keep the faith.
Yeah, it does just work. And anybody who says otherwise is banned. Oh, you're waiting for the joke? You're waiting for the punchline? There isn't. Todd has risen the price of DLC over years and years and years, and you're gonna like it. Okay, yeah, got it. Good. Continuing.
I want this to come across as a rant about how Bethesda should change their engine. I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't even think that's possible. The creation engine gets a lot of flack for always being a generation behind. You hear it constantly, you see it on social media constantly, people asking, why don't Bethesda change their engine? Why are they still using Gamebryo? They own id Tech 8, why can't they use that? Well, have you ever thought about why Bethesda's games are so distinctive? Their tech is a cell-based system that treats every space as a separate room, compartmentalizing the entire game world into a hierarchy similar to a directory tree. You've got a vast overworld, which is like your root directory, and from there you can enter cities, then individual buildings, dungeons, cellars, whatever. Every time you transition into a new room or cell, the game flushes your current environment out of memory and loads in a new one. And that's why Bethesda's games are characterized by the dreaded loading screens. It's not an engine designed for the kind of seamless world streaming that allows for something like Crimson Desert or Red Dead 2, where assets are loaded in and flushed out dynamically depending on where you are and where you're looking. It's why NPCs in Bethesda games do that characteristic thing of fading to nothing when they go outside instead of opening the front door and stepping through. They're dematerializing from the current environment and materializing in the next one. The advantage for Bethesda to stick with this...
Yeah, and I think that this is the interesting thing, is that yes, there are benefits to Creation Engine and things that it can do that other engines can't. That is true. But whether those things it can do are what gamers want is a separate question. That's a separate question. And so like Bethesda's Creation Engine can do physics simulation on 15,000 sandwiches in a single room. It can do that. Does anyone give a crap? Probably a few people, but like, are people willing to sacrifice everything else for that? Like, I think when people think of the next generation fantasy open world game, they're thinking of the scope and scale and technology that we've seen in something like Crimson Desert. They're not expecting what you are probably going to get, which is a structure and format similar to like what Fallout 4 had, where you go in buildings, you need to load in. And I think that that's just something that maybe like is not truly appreciated. And I think also at this point, you got to remember that a lot of Bethesda's tool sets and everything have been built around the Creation Club. They have a massive amount of money that flows in because of modders that are selling stuff through their games after they launch them, years after they launch them. And to change over to like Unreal or something is so extremely like labor intensive and would require all of that stuff to basically be abandoned. They'd be leaving like half of their annual revenue on the table, you know? I just don't think it makes sense. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, we perfectly modeled airflow and weather patterns so we can implement accurate, realistic pollen counts because your character is allergic to pollen. Yeah, but all it leads to is like when you're playing the game, randomly your player's vision fogs up. And so people are like, oh, my game is rendering poorly. No, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Well, nobody wants it.
Tech, when there are seemingly better alternatives out there, is that it allows them to build huge worlds and fill them with intricately scripted quests, fully simulated towns and...
Well, wait, intricately scripted quests? Have you played Starfield? Have you played? I'm going to cover Todd's ears when I say this. Okay, I'm just going to cover his ears when I say this. Okay, there. Well, don't want to cover his face. I want to be respectful. Have you played Starfield? Intricately scripted? Bro, it's like fetch quests. Like, I need a cup of coffee from this star system 50,000 light years away. We don't have coffee here that I like. Go defy the laws of physics for me. I'm thirsty. Like, what are we doing? It's, you know, I think years ago you could say that there were unique things. This is why I think it's important to establish that, like, what they've removed from the creation engine is important. What they've removed from their games is important. Because when they had like Radiant AI, imagine if they had built on that in Fallout 4 and then Fallout 76 and then into Starfield. If they had built on it and spent a decade or 2 decades, basically, from Oblivion, I guess, and going to Skyrim. Imagine if they had spent that time building out Radiant AI and NPC behaviors and schedules and things to make worlds feel living and breathing. Then you could have legitimately groundbreaking features that you could not have anywhere else. And then I think people would be okay with there being loading screens. Because I think if you're bringing something fantastic to the table, people are okay if there's some other stuff that's not as good. If you have an amazing Easter ham, I think people are okay if the green beans are a little bland. But when the whole table spread is just kind of bland and you forgot to bring the ham, and then also the green beans, you open the wrong can and it's actually peaches, people are going to be like, what is going on? You know, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I think that that's why, as they've removed stuff down to simplify and streamline the game, it's left a lot of the old school fans disenfranchised and frustrated because we're like, dude, all you had to do was make Skyrim, but modern tech wise, and we would have been happy. But you couldn't do that. Instead, it's probably going to have a lot more stuff cut out of it, you know? Peach beans, exactly.
Cities and barrel loads of interactive parsnips.
Yeah, they stopped offering the positive side of the trade-off. Yeah. Well, and to be clear, just so people don't think I'm bullying BGS, even though I get it. Ubisoft has done this too. Assassin's Creed is a fantastic example because it's so clear cut with what they've done with like parkour, where parkour, you look back at some of the clips of parkour in AC Unity, and then you compare it to what you saw in like Valhalla. And it's like laughable. It's laughable how much they cut out. Why? Like, for what reason? I guess because they felt they didn't need it because you weren't in big cities. So maybe there's some memory benefit. You cut that out, you can have more complicated combat move sets or something, maybe something like that. But either way, it's very clear that they're removing stuff. And gamers are just, they're sick of it. Like, I get it that sometimes stuff is cut out because it allows you to do other things. The key is that other thing needs to be something gamers actually want and appreciate. Because if you're cutting out cool parkour, but you're replacing it with like, oh, the foliage on trees is denser now. Well, if gamers don't really care about that, it doesn't really matter. You know, they're still going to leave less excited than they would have if you had good parkour, you know? Like, the total offering is important. The total offering is important, and that's just something that I think has kind of been left behind. And I think for years and years, a lot of studios thought we don't need to like really be groundbreaking. It just has to be good enough. Nowadays, that doesn't work anymore. I mean, we've seen it. You can spend $200 million on an open world game, and it could be good, like even pretty solid, but it needs to be amazing to compete because especially now you're starting to compete against like, you know, Pearl Abyss, which again, maybe you've not connected with Crimson Desert. I feel for you. I'm sorry. Because I love it. But even if you don't connect with the game, I think you can acknowledge that their pace of updates and changes and overhauls is insane. Like, it really does make other studios look like they're not even trying. They got feedback. Oh, this isn't working quite right. Okay, we fix it. Oh, this thing kind of broke. Okay, within 10 minutes, we have the patch to make the horse summon work again. Like, fix it. Like, it's crazy. But anyway.
Fully simulated towns and cities, and barrel loads of interactive parsnips very quickly and easily.
Yeah, they used to simulate cities. Now, I have, there's probably a term for it, but I think if players can't tell if something is simulated, like if players' perception, that's what I think ultimately matters, okay? That's what ultimately matters. So like if we have something like imagine a box, okay? We have a box. And inside the box is something awesome. I'm going to tell you. Okay. So like Ubisoft tells you this city is fully simulated. Okay. Fully simulated. If I can't tell it's fully simulated, like why would I care? Or maybe a better example. Let's use a real one. Okay. Let's use a real one. A candle, a real example. This is better. Forget the box. Forget the box. We'll do it live. Forget the box. I have a candle. I could tell you that this has been scented by the Grand Wizard of candle making in Romania, well-known candle capital of the world. And it's been scented with saffron, fine spices. They dug up Alexander the Great's tomb and took some of the wrappings and infused the scent of his musk into the candle. They did all these crazy things. You're telling me all of this. And maybe it's true. But let's say I get the candle and I smell it. And it smells like an armpit. None of the other stuff matters. None of the other stuff matters. I don't care how much saffron you put in it. I don't care what mummy wrappings you used in it. I don't care. Because as the customer, I'm dissatisfied. Okay? I don't like it. And so with something like this, if you're telling me like, oh, the city is fully simulated and we have all of these dynamic items that have gravity realistically simulated on them. Okay. But if my impression after playing it is that it's just lifeless and boring, that's all that really matters. You know, it's like when Todd was saying, when you're playing Starfield, if you see a planet in the distance, that's actually being simulated in the solar system and rotating in real time, realistically. Okay. But if it looks and feels like just a boring backdrop that has nothing to do with anything I'm doing, was that worth sacrificing like the gore system? Because I don't know if you realize Starfield doesn't have any gore. They cut that too out of Fallout. They had it in Fallout 4, cut all of the gore out for Starfield. There's barely blood effects. You know, it's like there's just a lot of things where it doesn't really matter how cool the bells and whistles under the hood are. If the car still drives like crap, it doesn't matter what you did to it under the hood. You know, maybe there's purists who will appreciate what they're doing, but for the average consumer that's just playing a game, they just want the fries put in the bag. You know, they just want the fries put in the bag at the end of the day. Like, what are we doing?
And over the years, they've gotten very good at streamlining the process. Lots of incidental details and world interactions are automated. For example, if an NPC's patrol route takes them near a source of heat, they'll stop and warm their hands. And that's a baked-in behavior in Elder Scrolls that's triggered by context, which the quest designer doesn't have to worry about. It's built in. And there's also the advantage of being able to track thousands, even millions of fully simulated physics objects across the entire game, which is much more difficult to do in streaming based engines, which is why in the Elder Scrolls you can leave a pie on the floor somewhere and it will very likely stay there until the end of time, while GTA has cars and pedestrians that disappear forever if you happen to look away. To be clear, this is a layman's understanding. I'm not a game dev, and I'm certainly not saying there's a right or wrong way to make an open world game. Every different way.
Well, yeah, it's there's different strokes for different folks, as they say. But I think it's important to understand that for certain types of games, different framings and different technologies work better. So like for GTA or Red Dead, having like the creation engine would be the wrong technical choice for that type of game, in my opinion. Okay. It's why I've said previously that I think for Starfield, the creation engine is probably the worst engine they could have possibly used. Because I think the vision of Starfield is this like massive universe, free to explore, this sense of wonder and astonishment. But to build it with a tool set that requires each individual cell on the planet to be simulated. And apparently I had a modder explain it to me. Apparently the way that it does it is it creates a texture for the planet. And when you pick a landing spot on the planet to land on, how it generates the fishbowl for you to go into is by locating the pixel you selected. So the resolution of the texture on the planet is the resolution of the fishbowls, if that makes sense. Very, very interesting. But it's like, I think for the type of game they wanted to make, the creation engine was just the worst choice. And usually it's like, do you put the cart before the horse or vice versa? You know, like you've got to, I think, decide what type of game you're going to be making based on the technical capabilities of your studio. And that's why I think if you're going to use the creation engine, the better option would have been to go and be like, we're going to stay in this solar system and we're going to like fully generate 3 planets. You know, we'll give you like Earth, maybe you can go to Mercury. We say Venus exploded, Mars, like we'll give you a few planets to go to. And of course they're scaled down, but we're going to simulate all of those and then hand place stuff, allow you to fly on the planet, do something like that. I think the way that they built Starfield was just, it highlighted the weaknesses of the creation engine instead of the strengths. And that's part of the reason that it's regarded the way that it is.
Way of achieving something has pros and cons. Creation 3 would suck for building GTA, and conversely, Rockstar's Rage engine would suck for building Elder Scrolls, not least because one of those things isn't a Bethesda technology that they've been using and honing and refining for nearly 30 years. There is an argument that perhaps Bethesda should ditch all the granular physics stuff that allows them to build all those lived-in spaces full of interactive world clutter, and maybe, I don't know, reduce the scope of their games a bit so they can put them out more regularly in a newer engine. Luckily, we have a case study for that.
Well, yeah, but I would also say these things don't exist in a vacuum, right? So if Bethesda's competitive advantage is those lived-in spaces with dynamic objects that have gravity simulated on them and physics simulated, like if that's their competitive advantage, that goes away once it's no longer an advantage. And what we've seen with like games like Crimson Desert is that no, they can also do that. Like they can also do that with even more dynamism. With like in Elder Scrolls, do you think you're going to be able to chop down trees and like use them to body slam bosses and stuff? Do you think that you're going to be able to light fires and watch it burn down wood structures? Are you going to like, do we really expect that to be the case? Probably not. Like all of a sudden the competitive advantage has gone away and they're so far behind all of these other areas that it kind of spoils the fun. I think maybe a way of thinking about this, again, I'm sorry, I'm a visual thinker. And so when I think, I see in pictures. And so often drawing things out helps. But if you imagine that there's like a bunch of individual like points, and maybe each of these, you know, one dot is like graphics and one dot is sound design. One dot is like open world simulation stuff with NPCs or whatever. And we break it down and we say like, okay, creation engine, we'll put in blue. It's like at these levels for each of these systems and each of these things that it's doing. But if we look at another engine, you know, we'll say like, oh, the physics simulation. Super competitive advantage. It's really good at that. Radiant AI, it's really good at those dynamic behaviors and stuff. And so we say that like this is where it's at. And so the general chart is, you know, boo, 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 boo. If you think of each feature individually. The moment that this is either regarded as not that important and nobody cares, or if somebody else comes along and does it better, but maybe has a line like this for their engine's capabilities, there's no reason to go with the creation engine anymore. And this feels all the more behind the times because the one competitive advantage you had either no longer applies or nobody cares about, or somebody else has done it just as well. And so all of a sudden, like, Can you justify now why these are so low? Can you justify now why your graphics pipeline is so much worse than the competition's? Can you justify why, you know, your load screens are such a low priority compared to the competition? You know, because this was the excuse for a long time, was that this was so good that it justified those being bad. But once that's no longer an excuse, you're kind of screwed. There's no justification.
Obsidian's Avowed is the closest thing we have to an Elder Scrolls game built in a modern engine, in this case Unreal 5.
Tainted Grail also is very, very good.
And everyone thought it kind of sucked, in part because it wasn't as interactive as Oblivion was.
Did people think? I mean, I know some people were like raging about it. I didn't think it sucked. I thought it was like pretty good. Like it's not a masterpiece or anything, but I don't think the devs would have claimed it's a masterpiece. But I thought it was pretty good. It was fun. It was a good AA kind of fantasy game. Like if you're going into it expecting Elder Scrolls 6, like yeah, you're gonna not have a great time. But I didn't think it was like terrible or bad or anything.
Was 20 years earlier. There are things intrinsic to a Bethesda game that you just can't remove before it stops being a Bethesda game. But there are obviously hard limits to what you can do with a system designed to organize a vast world into tiny, distinct chunks. And it's clear that Starfield is a massive square peg of an idea trying to fit into the round hole of Bethesda's technical capabilities. You can practically see the bones of Morrowind creaking to accommodate its ambition.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. My point is just that if you know that you have a square hole or a circular hole, if you know your hole is round, bear with me, okay? Insert jokes, whatever. If you know your hole is round, don't try to make a square peg. Make one that glides in a little easier. You know, you have the choice. They got to choose what they did and what they didn't do. They knew their hole was round. And yet they chose to shove a screwdriver in sideways, okay? Peg? Help me understand.
Entire planetary surfaces are separated into a vast grid of square cells. This is obviously a massive oversimplification, but essentially, a planet in Starfield is like an Oblivion mansion with millions and millions of doors. Cruise mode looks like it's more or less a giant room where you fly around a diorama of a solar system. Interdictions that take you back into normal space do so with a very obvious bokeh blur dissolve that really doesn't hide the join all that well. Making a space game with Bethesda's tech would be like trying to build, I don't know, a government website out of WordPress. Possible with caveats. Cramming a space sim into a framework designed very specifically to make Elder Scrolls games was always going to be something of a bodge job. They're doing the game design equivalent of building a car with nothing but garden tools. The fact that it gets anywhere at all is quite remarkable.
Sure. It doesn't mean people have to like it though. And I think that it is like, I don't think Todd's lying when he says that they had to do a ton of work to get the creation engine capable of making Starfield run. I think that's genuinely true. And I do think they spent years building it out, getting it working. I think that's true. But it still just is not there. Because again, it's an engine built around a very particular type of game. And Starfield is like the prime example of a game that is antithetical to most of what those core games are. Like it just, the concept is cool. That's why I think there's a version of Starfield that would have been amazing. But I think you would need the seamless tech of something like a No Man's Sky to make it work.
Though it's Bethesda's most forward-thinking game in spirit, in practice it's a massive regression, a throwback to the procedurally generated vastness of Daggerfall, a game so big it felt tiny, boasting a landmass twice the size of actual Great Britain but with nowhere near enough intrigue to fill a shed in Swindon. It could also have been described as irresponsibly big. Its sequel, Morrowind, the game that put Bethesda on the map and provides the template for their games to this day, made a point of being entirely handcrafted. Not even a single percentage point of the size of Daggerfall, it nonetheless felt enormous because its map could barely contain all of the intricate adventures within. Back then, Bethesda learnt the lesson that less is more, but it seems to be a lesson it is eager to forget. Starfield isn't anyone's favourite Bethesda game, it certainly isn't mine, Morrowind need you ask, but I admire it for how close it gets to an ideal that should be entirely out of the question. If nothing else, it's a masterclass in making do. Free lanes isn't a do-over or an overhaul or even something that makes Starfield palatable for those who bounced off it before, but it does add a rich new set of features and intrigue to a game that many of us desperately want to love because, for all of its shortcomings, it is Skyrim in space. And even after we've been presented with a gigantic neon sign that says Skyrim in space doesn't work, it remains a most enticing prospect. And if you want to find out exactly how free lanes and all the new DLCs coming keep Starfield fresh, check out our preview. And as always, keep it IGN.
Good video. I like him a lot. I think that them hiring him, and it seems like they might have even moved him over from Eurogamer fully, which I think is cool. But I think that it's, like I said at the near the top, I think that they just got in this spot where it was pretty clear that they either, I think they could overhaul it and get it so people like you and me would enjoy it again, or they could just double down on what it is and move forward. And I think that at least is a decision that makes sense. As for like the future of Bethesda, I think that they're facing an uphill battle. Let's be perfectly honest. Like going into Elder Scrolls 6, expectations have never been higher. The standards are higher than ever. And now we are going to be getting, and we are currently getting, fantasy games that raise that bar further. When you look at RPGs, we've gotten games like Baldur's Gate that raise the bar. When you look at something like, or even like Witcher 3, which of course was a decade ago, but that still is going to be compared to it. If you look at open world games, we've got games like Crimson Desert, which are, though far from perfect, they show how a modern open world game can work and how crazy ambitious and technologically insane it can be. And so all of these bars are being raised. And I think Bethesda, their best course of action is to just go back to basics and focus on what they do well and try to avoid the things they don't do well. Bethesda's just not able to keep up in terms of the tech. So don't try. Don't like, I think, well, that sounds bad. Don't act like you are keeping up with the behemoths when you're not. Like, don't piss them on my back and tell me it's raining, you know? Focus on what you're good at, which for them is environmental storytelling. For them, it's the sandbox gameplay. And I think they should go back to the core fundamentals that made a game like Skyrim truly fun and enjoyable. Whether they will try to do that or not remains to be seen. Todd has described, there was an interview years ago where he was asked, I think it was circa like 2012, 2013, somebody asked him, I think it's in the Starfield Saga video I did. Somebody asked him, what is the Elder Scrolls 6 going to be? And Todd said, well, for each Elder Scrolls game, we know what the concept is, like what the main feature is going to be. And so for Oblivion, it was the fidelity that they wanted to achieve, the forests and things like that. For Skyrim, it was dragons. It was all about dragons. And he said, I know what the concept is for Elder Scrolls 6. Our technology currently can't do it. I don't know what that would have been in 2013, but he apparently had the idea in 2013 of what that would be. My personal suspicion is that it's basically the base building stuff. It's going to be build your own castle, you know, and then you can recruit people to come and work in your castle, work in the kitchen, work in the armory, and they'll repair your armor for you. I think it's going to be stuff like that. That's my personal expectation. I think that's the natural progression of what they did from where they started with Skyrim and then where Todd would want to end up. So my guess is that Skyrim or Elder Scrolls 6 rather is going to be built around that core mechanic. And I think that's something that they do well. And I think that could work. Build your town or a castle. Yeah, it might have upgraded since they've already built out, like building a castle I think would be really easy for them with the Fallout 76 stuff and the settlement systems and everything with Fallout 4 and Starfield. I think they could build a castle very easily. So maybe the way to take it up a notch is build a town, or if it's a castle, then it's like the surrounding, sheds and shops and stuff that you could place. And I think that could be legitimately a really cool mechanic, especially if you build out the settlement system and that's a core gameplay mechanic that motivates you to go through the world to find new blacksmiths. Imagine like the guides. Did you know the best blacksmith for Elder Scrolls 6 is located in these mountains? You just have to go into this cave and talk to this vendor and hire him and bring him this item, which will bring your bond with him to 100. Like, I can see it now. I think that that's probably where they focus. And if they focus on that could be good. And people might overlook the fact that there's still going to be load screens when you go into caves. There's still going to be load screens when you go into buildings. Like, I think people will overlook that if there are legitimately fun and engaging gameplay loops that keep you hooked. My fear is just like in the past, Bethesda doesn't seem to appreciate what they're good at and what they're bad at. And so they get in these spots where they get themselves in trouble. Like they try to punch above their weight class with certain things, you know? Like I think for Starfield's a great example of they're capable of this, but they tried to do that. And because their tech couldn't keep up with that vision and ambition, a lot of people, it just fell flat, you know? Because when you put yourself into that realm, you're competing against the Star Citizens, the No Man's Skies, the Elite Dangerouses. And if you can't keep up with them in certain factors, it just makes you look bad, you know? So we'll see what it's like. But I think they hopefully understand the assignment. And, you know, Todd, in a recent interview, he described Elder Scrolls 6 as like, well, he described, I think, Starfield as something to the effect of like, you know, it was a cool divergence from our normal way of doing it, but Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be much more like our classical games. Todd Howard has offered a fresh update on Elder Scrolls 6. Quote, everybody knows why we announced it that way. It's not my... or knows that we announced it that way. Okay, current state of development. It's going well. We are happy with it. It is going to be a while yet. We are happy with where we push the technology and how the game is coming together. We are able to play it. We have passed major milestones internally. The majority of the studio is on the game. And then he said, as we come back to Elder Scrolls 6, we're coming back to that kind of classic style that we have missed and that we know really, really well. We spent the last several years bringing Creation Engine 2, which powered Starfield, up to Creation Engine 3. That is going to power Elder Scrolls 6 and beyond. We are really happy with new rendering and world systems and how we bring the detail close to the camera immediately. This one, I remember Todd saying this. What, honest question, chat, what do you think this even means? Because Todd said this and I don't know what it means. We are really happy with the new rendering and world systems and how we bring detail close to the camera immediately. How we bring detail close to the camera immediately. Is that just talking about load times? Is that DLSS? Maybe DLSS 5 is what he's talking about. I don't know, man. It's maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. How we bring detail close to the camera immediately. That to me thinks like, okay, quick movement, maybe fast traversal. So like you can warp to places quickly. I don't know, man. I don't know what that even means. Because DLSS, it's like, oh, how we can bring more detail close to the camera. That could be DLSS 5. But he says immediately, which is like speed. So I don't know why, like that doesn't have anything to do with DLSS 5. I don't know. We'll be able to zoom. That's the big new features. Hold down right trigger and he'll lean in. You can run really effing fast. Maybe that's what it is. It could be like I've done this where I'll start talking and then I have like what I want to say in my head, but then I like stumble on my words and it ends up just not really making any sense. Maybe that's what that was, where Todd's just like trying to say something. We're really happy with the new rendering and world systems and how we, you know, bring detail closer to the camera immediately. Maybe that's what it was. LOD's loading. It could be that. Like they've tried to specifically address pop-in. Maybe that's it. I don't personally recall pop-in being terrible in Fallout 4, even. Like even in Starfield, it wasn't really a big problem with pop-in, but maybe that's what he's referring to. I think that could make sense. Like higher levels of detail when you're close to the camera. So that could be LODs, maybe. I can see that. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's just weird. Pop-in in Crimson Desert is awful. Pop-in in Crimson Desert is it's, if it makes you feel better, it was worse at launch, but there are times where it, like specifically there's little like bitty particles on the ground, like little rocks and stones, and for some reason when you raise model detail in the settings, it happens more. So like the higher your level of detail is, the more those things pop in as you're running. You eventually like tune it out really, really quickly, but it does happen. It does happen. Another way of saying there's more detail, just like 16 times the detail. Dude, basically. I think Todd now is way more aware of how anything he says, if it is a soundbite, will get clipped and turned into a meme. So now he's like very cautious not to say things in that really snippy, zappy way that he used to do. Have you noticed that? Like, when was the last big Todd meme? I think it was 16 times the detail in 2018. Like, even with Starfield, there wasn't really a clear one like that, you know? It just doesn't really work. Damn, Todd's no fun no more. Yeah, I mean, literally. Dare I say widowy. But anyway, yeah, lots of fun to be had with Starfield. I agree, it's not going to magically change it, but I do think that they understand the assignment moving forward, and I hope that they actually understand and appreciate that truly and fully, because they have potential. If they could knock this out of the park, it'd be great, but you know, time will tell. Time will tell. He took my thing.